If you've been told your diagnosis defines your future, this episode will show you why prognosis statistics don't determine what happens for you next, and what actually can shift your healing potential starting today. You've been told it's incurable, but here at Renegade Remission, we believe in rewriting the story. If you're facing a terminal or chronic illness, you are not alone. I'm Eleni Welch, certified nutritionist, and each week I share healing strategies and remission stories to help you take control of your health, feel better, and rediscover hope. Welcome back to Renegade Remission. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why a diagnosis describes what has happened, not what your body is still capable of doing, learn how underlying biology and not labels drives real healing change, and hear a real example of survival beyond expected outcomes that shows how disease behavior can shift when internal conditions change. Stay until the end because I'll walk you through a clear framework you can use immediately to reclaim your agency without denying reality. One of the hardest moments in illness is hearing the words of a diagnosis. Many people describe it as a dividing line, life before and life after, where suddenly your identity collapses into a single label. Whether it's ALS, stage 4 cancer, autoimmune disease, Alzheimer's, MS, whatever it is, what often comes along with the diagnosis is an unspoken message. This is what will happen next. But here's something rarely explained clearly. A diagnosis is a description of patterns observed at a moment in time. It is not a measurement of your body's full adaptive capacity, and it is not a complete map of what may still change. Medicine relies on categories because categories help guide treatment. Yet biology itself is dynamic. Cells can respond, systems adapt, internal environments can shift constantly. Understanding this difference between a diagnosis label and the living biology of your body changes everything. It doesn't promise guarantees, but it restores possibility where certainty once felt final. Before we explore the science behind this idea, let's look at a real-world example that illustrates how outcomes sometimes move beyond expectations. This is a documented memoir from someone who chose to see their diagnosis as information rather than accepting it as their identity. Chris Wark was 26 years old when he was diagnosed with stage 3C colon cancer. The tumor was large, several lymph nodes were involved, and his medical team recommended aggressive chemotherapy following surgery. Like many people who receive a diagnosis that's serious at a young age, he describes the moment as surreal, a sudden shift from feeling invincible to feeling as though life had split into a before and after. He underwent surgery to remove the tumor, but after researching and reflecting deeply, he made a decision that felt right for him at that time. He declined chemotherapy. Instead, he committed to changing the internal environment of his body as radically as he could. In his memoir and interviews, he describes transforming his diet towards whole, plant-focused foods, prioritizing daily movement, addressing stress and emotional patterns, improving sleep, and immersing himself in practices he believed supported healing. This was not one single intervention. It wasn't a supplement or a protocol. It was a shift in identity from someone fighting disease to someone actively supporting their health. He openly acknowledges that his choices were unconventional and not universally recommended, and he doesn't frame his story as a blueprint for others. But what makes his experience powerful is what happened over time. Years passed, follow-up testing showed no recurrence of the cancer, and decades later, he continues to report being cancer-free. Chris's story highlights something essential for this conversation. A diagnosis is simply describing how things are at a specific moment in time. It doesn't define the full range of biological responses that may unfold afterwards. And when people begin changing the conditions inside of their lives, physically, emotionally, and metabolically, sometimes the trajectory shifts in ways statistics and doctors cannot predict. The first thing that's really important to understand as to why diagnosis can never capture our healing potential is that diagnosis describes a disease state, not our adaptive capacity. Medical diagnoses categorize symptoms and measurable findings, but they don't capture the dynamic processes constantly occurring within the body. Biological systems continuously adjust through gene expression changes, immune signaling shifts, metabolic recalibration, and nervous system regulation. Research in systems biology shows that disease progression is fluid rather than fixed. This means that two people with the same diagnosis may follow entirely different trajectories because their internal environments driving disease differ drastically. And it's important to understand that root causes often matter more than labels. Precision medicine research increasingly demonstrates that diagnostic categories group people together with very different biological drivers. One individual's autoimmune disease may be strongly linked to microbiome imbalance, but another's may involve viral or parasitic triggers. Another may involve chronic stress signaling or repressed emotions or childhood trauma. When underlying drivers are supported, symptoms can sometimes change even when the diagnostic label remains. This is why many remission stories describe a turning point where the focus shifted from quote-unquote fighting the disease to supporting the body's healing processes. It's also important to understand that repair systems continue even during illness. The body maintains ongoing repair mechanisms, autophagy, immune surveillance, antioxidant defenses, even during advanced disease. These processes do not shut off simply because illness is present. If they did, you would die within minutes. They may become overwhelmed or impaired, but they remain responsive. This matters because healing is not an on or off switch. It's a spectrum of improvement that can occur alongside illness. It's important to remember that prognosis statistics describe groups, not individuals. Prognostic models are based on averages. They cannot include every variable influencing individual outcomes, inflammation levels, microbiome shifts, nervous system state, treatment response, or environmental changes. Statistics help doctors guide expectations, but they cannot predict how any one person's biology will respond over time. I have a whole episode about this particular topic of why prognoses miss the mark so often. It's my episode 45, Why Doctors Get Prognosis Wrong and What Unexpected Survivors Teach Us About What's Possible. So be sure to check out that episode to have a better understanding of the systemic weakness of a prognosis. It's also important to understand that our nervous system actively shapes healing. Research on the inflammatory reflex shows that vagus nerve signaling directly influences cytokine production and immune regulation. When the nervous system shifts towards safety, whether it's through breathwork, emotional support, prayer, therapy, or restorative practices, measurable changes can occur in inflammatory signaling. This means that our emotional state is a very important part of our biological healing, and it's not something that a diagnosis or prognosis can predict. And finally, one of the most important things to remember is that unexpected recovery is a documented reality. Collections such as the spontaneous remission literature demonstrate that disease behavior sometimes deviates significantly from expectations. These cases are not mystical anomalies, they're not outliers. They highlight that healing is complex and how adaptable human biology truly is. Your diagnosis provides important information, but it's not a fixed identity and it's not a complete map of what your body is capable of doing next. Healing often begins when people shift focus from the label of the diagnosis itself to the internal environment shaping how that condition behaves and begin to work to influence that. One of the first things you can do is begin by separating your identity from a condition. Instead of viewing yourself as your diagnosis, try languages that preserve your selfhood, such as, I'm a person living with X condition. This subtle shift reduces threat perception in the nervous system and opens psychological space for change. Next, identify one biological area that feels most approachable right now, whether it's your sleep quality, gut health, inflammation, stress regulation, or nutrient support. Choose one, not many, and begin by supporting it gently, consistently, rather than trying to do everything all at once with intensity. Create a daily question you can ask yourself. What is going to reduce burden on my body today? And then try and implement an action step that does that. Be sure to catch loops of catastrophic worst-case scenario thinking. Replace them with things such as, my biology is dynamic, my body is capable of healing. Statistics describe populations, they don't describe me. This doesn't deny reality, it just prevents your nervous system from going into a downward spiral. And commit to one repeatable micro action each day, whether it's a walk, a calming breath practice, a nourishing meal, or reaching out to friends or family for connection and support. Small, consistent signals teach your nervous system that healing is ongoing. A diagnosis describes what has been observed, but it does not capture the full adaptability of your living body. Your body is not loyal to labels, it is loyal to balance, repair, and survival. And when you begin supporting the internal conditions that allow healing to occur, sometimes shifts happen in ways that statistics alone cannot explain. Your story is still unfolding. In following episodes, we'll discuss more nutrition and lifestyle, as well as the mind-body connection in terminal and chronic illness. So stay tuned for those episodes, and until then, go be renegades.